Welcome to the Dance is Medicine podcast. My name is Sophia. I'm a neuroscientist and dance healer, and I've created this podcast for dancers to be able to share their stories of their relationship between dance and healing and how dance has helped them with various health problems. I think science is great and statistics are great, but it's good to have people sharing their stories and inspiring others, and we can create this community where we relate to each other and know each other at a deeper level. So today we have Lee. She has been dancing for the since she was 3 years old. And she has performed now for 13 years all over the world. She has an amazing background in dance and performance, and she has done various types of dance. She's also been awarded teacher certifications in classical ballet, and she has multiple types of training in dance. There's a big list here, and she has been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis in 2018 and has been an advocate for dancers with chronic illnesses. And she says that she firmly believes that dance has helped her cope with her diagnosis while also keeping her physically and mentally strong all the way to the ups and downs that MS brings. So I'm really excited to hear a little bit more about her story. She has an amazing, incredible dance background, and I'm really excited to hear what she has to say. So would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you so much for having me, Sophia. I really appreciate being here today. Hi everybody. My name is Lee Brockman Horowitz, and I am, as Sophia said, I am a longtime dancer and a dance instructor, a dance teacher. The main dance styles that I have performed and that I teach at this point are classical ballet, specifically the Vaganova syllabus. For those of you who are familiar, that's the Russian method syllabus. I have an extensive background in folk and in character dance. That is probably my hugest love and is where I did the most of my performing when I was performing. Since I retired from the stage, I have been teaching, and of course I taught before I retired, but what I teach is classical ballet, character, folk, and musical theater, of course conditioning, and every once in a while I'll dive into a few other little things that I've done here and there, but that's pretty much what I teach at this point. And since the pandemic began, I've been very lucky in that I have found a way to continue teaching especially my teen and my adult ballet community via Zoom. And because of that community during the pandemic that's gotten built up through social media and online and via Zoom, I've become really aware in the past year of how many people are out there with chronic illnesses and who feel for one reason or another, and everybody has their own story, that they don't have a place in the dance world, that teachers don't often understand the ups and downs of chronic illness life and aren't as supportive as maybe these students would like for them to be. So, you know, it's in one hand, lucky for me as somebody with the chronic illness to hear their stories because I can relate, and then I can offer them a home in a way that maybe isn't in a studio, but it's still dancing. So that's something that we've created over the past year and a half, and I've been really empowered to speak up about my own chronic illness and hope that helps people on their journey. So that's been kind of the past year and a half of life. My story itself, like Sophia said, began when I was 3. My grandmother, my much beloved grandmother, saw my high energy when I was young and said, this child needs to be in dance. Told my parents she needs to be in dance. And it wasn't something, nobody in my family is a dancer. It wasn't because, everybody was into music or dance or in the arts. That quite the opposite. My family is a family of scientists and lawyers, and we use that side of our brain more than we necessarily use the artist side of the brain. But my grandmother saw it in me, and she got me into my first ballet class when I was young. And I tell you this part of the story of my life where dance is formed because that grandmother herself had a chronic illness. My grandmother was diagnosed with emphysema and ultimately passed away from emphysema. And her spirit, her fight, her drive to live a life, beyond her diagnosis is something that I really relate to. And it's something that I have strived to do. I always look to her because she's who got me started in this whole field of dance. So I look to her and the way that she lived her life in that part of her life, and choose to emulate that part of her. The diagnosis in 2018, I'll just tell y'all a little bit about life right before my diagnosis. And I have always been somebody, again, high energy. So I've always been somebody who's held multiple jobs, even when I was performing. Like most dance artists in this world, you have to have a second job, sometimes a third job, to make things work. And that was also my experience. So I was always working as a performing artist. I was working as a teacher. I was working at that point at Loyola University, New Orleans. I was a paralegal for 16 years. I always had multiple jobs. And when we moved to St. Louis, we moved from New Orleans to St. Louis after we had our first child from my husband's job. And that was 5 years ago. That did not change. So at that point I was retired. I was just teaching, choreographing around, and had come to St. Louis. Didn't have any family or friends here. So we were really starting from the beginning. I opted to take a ballet class for myself, which hadn't happened in probably 7 years, just to go in and take a class for myself instead of teaching, and try to get my ballet body somewhat back in shape. Post baby is really what that was about. And I was there, and my adult ballet teacher at the Center of Creative Arts, that's COCA here in St. Louis, saw me and said, "You have more than just an amateur background, don't you?" And I was like, "Well, yes, I've danced for a long time." And so we kind of got talking, and she was like, "Would you ever consider teaching character here at COCA?" And that's how I started teaching in St. Louis. So I was teaching for COCA. I was teaching for another dance studio, and I had gone back to the classroom. Mostly because of my kiddo, right? He was I wanted to know more about his life and how his mind worked, and being in the classroom helped me really delve into the science of early childhood. And I love that work. So I was doing that work, but that's kind of burning the candles at both ends. And I was working on the weekends, and I was a mom, so and a wife and everything else. So it was a lot. And I started noticing that I was getting more and more frequent headaches. I started noticing that my left eye was hurting quite a bit. It was tender to the touch in the space above my eye, kind of where that bone is. I was noticing there was tenderness there. I chalked all of that up to stress and to overwork and burning the candle at both ends. It was nothing new that I did that. And sometimes I did have, physiological reactions because I was exhausted. So, you do the things that you do. You start laying off of coffee, and you try to go to bed earlier, and you try to, fix your schedule so you're not so tired all the time. And nothing was working. It was actually getting worse. And maybe the scariest part of that is that I didn't even notice all the time how bad it was getting, because I was starting to become accustomed to living with the pain. And that's a part of, right? I think that's also a part of dance, right? We get accustomed to pushing through pain, which is not, that is a different topic of conversation. We can get into that one day as well, but it's not always a healthy thing to push through pain. So, I was living with it. And my co-teacher at the time at the preschool kept telling me, because she and I were very dear friends, and she would tell me, Lee, you're really holding your eye a lot. Are you sure you don't need to get that looked out? Or Lee, you're looking tired. I'm worried about you. So she was kind of my touchstone at that point, and keeping me honest. At one point, across my left eye, I had a black line, like a film across my line of vision. And that's when I got really scared, because no matter how tired I had been before, no matter how exhausted I'd been, I'd never lost vision. So I started making an appointment, tried to make an appointment at the eye doctor. Unfortunately, as these things happen, right? When you need your doctors, it's not always the optimal time for them. My eye doctor that I had established with here in St. Louis when we moved was on vacation, and was on vacation for almost a month. He had taken a sabbatical. So they were trying to find me a doctor that I could see, and quickly. Unfortunately, the doctor that they sent me to, he was not available for many weeks. They sent me to another doctor who diagnosed me with pink eye. And I don't know about any of you, but because of teaching, I've had pink eye many, many times in my life. And I know how the medicines that they give you for pink eye react, at least with me physically. I know those reactions. And when after about 36 hours, I wasn't feeling any relief, I knew this was not pink eye. This was something else that hadn't been caught. I had gone to the studio that Sunday. I was doing a couple of privates. I finished my second private, which at that point I was doing contemporary. So like I tell you, every once in a while I delve into the other parts of my life that I've done in dance. And I was doing a contemporary solo for a young college student. And we finished, it was a lot of floor work. So it was a lot of up and downs, and the pain in my eye because of the level changes and being upside down and doing the work that contemporary requires. My eye was throbbing to the point that I really thought I had seriously damaged. And when I got back up from one of the contemporary movements, the whole eye just went black. So I called my husband and I said, I don't know what's going on. I know it's not pink eye. I'm driving myself to the hospital, which luckily here in St. Louis was only about 10 minutes away from where I was teaching. So I got in the car, opted for him to stay home with the baby, who was only 2 at that point. We didn't, again, no friends and family meant that we didn't have a huge network to rely on for childcare. So he stayed home. I went to the hospital, and luckily at the hospital, and I know this is not everybody's story, right? You're not always believed when you go to the hospital, the ER, but I was very lucky. And they got me in. The resident who came and saw me for my eye, the optical resident, right away said, I think we're looking at something that I need to get my boss in here to come look at you. So things moved very quickly at that point. I had an MRI, on top of the MRI, immediately I got checked into the hospital, and the diagnosis was multiple sclerosis, or MS. And I don't know if all of you are aware of what they do when you're diagnosed for MS, but there's a whole lot of things that go into that week. There's the testing. They test you so much. There seems like there's a group of people in your room every 2 seconds. And there were a lot of tests. They run a lot of MRIs. They have to make sure, where all the lesions are. So you have testing on your brain, and then you have testing on your spine. They do a spinal tap to see how your spinal fluid is doing. They take a lot of blood, and they put you on an immense amount of steroids. Because for those of you who don't know, MS is a game of inflammation, right? So you're trying to keep the inflammation down as much as possible. And that was a week of a very steep learning curve for me. Just figuring out what this thing was. What is MS? I'd heard of it. I didn't really know what the science behind it was. So as much as I could with one eye, I was reading as much as I could. I was listening as much as I could. to medical experts who were explaining MS in simple terms for me to understand it. And I was feeling incredibly overwhelmed, very, very overwhelmed. And of course I had, you know, an IV or two and stuff all over my body. At the time, when I was first diagnosed, there was not another patient in my room. It was a dual room, but luckily I didn't have anybody in there at the time when I was first diagnosed. For the first 4 days, I didn't have a roommate. So I was able to kind of use the room as I wanted to. And I had asked the nurse, if, as long as I was feeling well, would it be okay if I did a little exercising? And they were like, as long as you feel okay doing that, sure. You know, you're not going to hurt your MS any better or worse, just be careful of the IVs. And the first thing that I did before I did anything else in my life, I mean, really, honestly, before, outside of talking to my husband and maybe my family, my parents, before I called any friends, before I did anything else, I got my phone out with my ballet music and I gave myself bar in the hospital room within 24 hours of being diagnosed. I don't know how else to explain to people that that is how much home ballet is, how much home dance is for me. It's the place that I go to when I am my most confused, when I'm my most overwhelmed, when I'm my most scared, and it settles me down. And so I did bar multiple times a day in that week at the hospital. And I think the doctors thought I was crazy. Luckily, there's so much luck. There's so many blessings in this story, and I want everybody to know that I'm aware of that. I'm very appreciative of it. The head doctor on my neuro team was a dancer in her previous life before medicine, and she was a dancer out of Boston Ballet, and she understood completely. You know, she was like, as long as you feel up to it, you do it. I know probably better than anybody else here at the hospital what this means to you. So just don't overexert yourself, but do what you need to do to settle down. That's your meditation. I get it. So I was given absolutely the green light that way as well. So that was lucky. Yeah. So that is my initial diagnosis story with MS. And I have remitting relapsing MS, which is it's kind of a middle ground. And it means for me specifically that I do have a lot of fatigue. I do have some pins and needles in my feet and in my hands, especially when I'm very tired. It does mean that I have medication that I'm on every single day. Right now I'm in pills, but I'm sure before too long, because of the way that my MS is developing, that I will be on an infusion before the optic nerve is still my hill. I'm about to have a flare. My optic nerve tells me that left eye pain just comes back immediately. And the amount of steroids they gave me in that first week after diagnosis at the hospital, I guess because we caught it more quickly than some other people have, did mean that my vision came back. So if I start seeing too many spots in my eye, plus the optic pain nerve, I know that I'm really pushing a boundary that I can't push. So I have to ease back. So again, that's my signal. With all of those things though, my version of MS, at least right now, at least today, is not one where I am having to walk with a cane or a support. I am not at the point yet where my vision is completely gone. I still have control of my motor functions. The lesions, knock on wood, right now are isolated to my brain and haven't gone into my spinal cord yet. So there's some positive things there right now. My speech is good. My neurological ability to think of words and to remember things, all of that is still positive. So I'm lucky in a lot of those ways. the the ways that I feel the MS on a daily basis, because I do have a 5-year-old, and because I am teaching, and because, you know, I still have a lot of energy when I have it. And I'm ambitious, right? I like to do things. I like to create. I like to offer a lot to my students, and as much as I can, I think I'm still burning the candle at both ends. You know, so the fatigue is bad. The fatigue is bad. The headaches are bad. When I do have flares, and there are breakthrough flares even on the medication, that those are bad. They make me very sick. It's for people who have migraines, you might know this, like, where a headache can be so bad and so debilitating that you end up feeling nauseous and you're throwing up and doing these kind of things. That's definitely my version of MS when I have a flare. Stress exacerbates everything in the neuro world, especially with MS. So when I'm on a high period of stress, which, you know, PS, the pandemic has not eased up on anybody's stress levels, right? So this year, I would say very much so, I'm feeling more of the fatigue. I'm feeling more of the tingling. I'm noticing more signs and symptoms, because I think we're all just living under a general stress. Yeah, so those are my MS ways that it comes about. Now, where dance is related to MS for me, I've never stopped teaching. The week after my diagnosis, I was back in the classroom at the preschool, and I was back at the studio teaching. And A, because I physically could. It wasn't pretty, but I physically could. And B, because that's just part of my spirit. Dance has taught me a lot of things. I think one of the things that dance has taught me, because of my very specific relationship with dance, has taught me to push through a lot. And again, it's not always healthy to push through pain. It's not always healthy to push through certain parts of what dance teaches you to push through. But in this way, I appreciate dance, that you don't give up. You know, you are on stage, something goes wrong, you fix it. You keep going. And I definitely hold on to that with both hands where MS is concerned, that it won't stop me from living. It won't, you know, if this is the time that I have before maybe I don't have a body that wants to listen to what my brain is trying to tell it, then you know what? I'm going to use every single moment that I possibly can with my child, with my dancers, with my ballet community. I'm going to enjoy every moment that I can and give back as much as I possibly can in the time that I'm given. That is very important to me. So in that way, I think dance keeps me honest, and it still is my safe place. You know, it still is the place that I go to when I'm scared, or when I'm tired, or when I just need to feel the most like me. And that keeps me honest too. Then the other part of dance, the more physical part of dance, where I think dance really helps me, is my doctors, you know, you have it once to 2 to 3 times a year, you have checkups with your neurologists, and they're always looking, especially if something, you know, I talked a little bit about having a breakthrough on my medication, and having some flares, and that's often a sign, at least for me, that my brain has grown another lesion and there's more things going on. And the doctors just look at me, they're like, you know, for the amount of lesions that you have now, we should see many more physical signs in your motor functions. We should see more. And you don't, like, you're blowing our minds. You don't exhibit those things. And the only thing I can tell you all about why that's different than maybe their other patients is the amount of dance that I've had in my life. Dance wires your brain very specifically. And luckily, it wires your brain in a way that supports what MS is trying to break down. So I don't want to ever stop. And they'll tell me, listen, if your balance and your coordination and all of this is this good because of the dancing you're doing, don't stop. It's what's keeping you going. So you just keep doing it. And so I do, you know, and I think that for me is for all of the things that dance has taken, not taken away, but the dance world can be pretty brutal. It can be pretty hard. So for all of the times that I have felt like, oh my gosh, what am I doing in this dance world right now? I can say, this is why I was in this dance world and made it through for as long as I've made it through. Oh my gosh, it really has helped my brain. I mean, it literally has helped my brain. So I feel really lucky about that. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful to dance for that. And then how does that then translate into how I can help other dancers with chronic illnesses? Most chronic illnesses have a component of fatigue. Most chronic illnesses have a component of, I'm thinking about my RA dancers, my rheumatoid arthritis dancers right now, where your joints, your muscles are just not responding the way you want them to. A lot of the chronic illnesses of the dancers that I teach have a neurological component. So balance and coordination, right? Balance and coordination are huge in the chronic illness world, and that is, what are the huge tenets of ballet, of dance? Balance and coordination. So it seems to be a good fit, right? That's what I'm trying to say. It seems to be a good fit that dancers with neurological issues, dancers with chronic illnesses, people who are not dancers who have these things, who are experiencing these things maybe for the first time, I will tell them, they'll write me and I'll say, listen, yes, it can feel scary and it can feel overwhelming, but you are in control of how you respond to all of it. And that's going to give you your feeling that you can make it through. So here are some things that I say. It doesn't matter if you've never danced before. It doesn't matter if you're an absolute beginner. Dance is something that can help you, and you don't have to do ballet. There are so many. Go do a line dance class. Go do folk dance. It's going to all give you the balance and coordination that you're looking for to combat what's happening in your brain. And that will give you control and make you feel powerful. And that's what you're going to need to hold on to get through the times when you're feeling overwhelmed by your diagnosis. So, it doesn't matter if you're a beginner or if you've danced since you were 3. It doesn't matter. Dance can help you all the way through. And that is, I guess that's kind of what I wanted to share today with you all about dance.
Thank you so much. That was amazing. There's a couple of points you mentioned, that you were pushing through the pain in the beginning, and how this is very common for dancers to just push through whatever we are going through. And I think it's important to give that message that is not healthy. Whilst dance is healthy, then when we start going into these strict modes and really pushing ourselves over the limits, then we are counterbalancing some of the benefits of dance. And I found it really interesting that your teacher noticed that you weren't looking great, you weren't feeling good, and I think it's up to also the people teaching to be tuned to their students' bodies, be tuned to their students' emotions. I'm really noticing those shifts, and so that's really important. And also the other aspect is that you were supported as well through the dance community to keep dancing, and that's really important, that we don't put away, or try to exclude a dancer just because they have some health problem, they have an injury. It's really important to be welcoming those people back. And I think one of the crucial aspects is really for dance studios and dance schools, teachers, etc., is to be aware of dance science, is to be aware of how the mind works for dancers, in dancers, how the brain works. All of those aspects are really important, not only to be in tune with our students, but also to be able to support them when they go through stuff like this. So, and that was really interesting. You mentioned that, and then you mentioned as well how the brain, how dance wires the brain very specifically, and that's so true. I can really vouch for that, and how all the connections we make through dance. When the connections in the brain are really strong, they're very difficult to destroy. The brain is always trying to make things happen. And if it doesn't happen in a certain way because there's a lesion somewhere, you will try it another way. And the more different ways the brain has to do different things, the more different ways the brain has to do the same thing, the more tools we have given the brain, the more motor neural pathways we have given to the brain, the more it can use. So everything we do, from movement to things we read, things we say, things we do on a daily basis, all of that is really giving the brain some like kind of a toolbox of various things that it can do. And so dance has this amazing ability to really gather the motor aspects, the cognitive aspects, the emotional aspects, the social aspects. So there's a lot of different components that we are giving various tools for in the brain. And that's what makes it so important for recovery. And, studies have been showing how dance has been more effective than rehabilitation for MS. In terms of like posture, coordination. And it's interesting that you mentioned, the doctor said that I should have been having more motor disturbances than I'm having. And that's because, your brain, okay, if there's a part that is really not working, and the brain is like, why, we can't do it this way. If it has other ways of doing the same thing, you'll get them. You'll go and look for them. And, good example is like when people have injuries or brain tumors or whatever lesion they have in the brain, we see straight away how the brain is trying to always compensate for that, the lack of structure or something that is missing. That's what makes the brain amazing, and it's very adaptable. It's very flexible. We have the capacity, the brain has the capacity of creating new neurons. It has the capacity of restructuring neural pathways and constructing new ones. So it's something that, okay, the lesions will keep happening, but it's a matter of giving the brain the most techniques and the most it can have to overcome those visions and keep functioning. And and dance also has the other aspects where it keeps your body healthy, it's exercise, has all the other benefits for your overall health. So I always ask every dancer what they would tell to somebody who is not a dancer. How would you convince them to embrace this art form? I think you already replied to that, but would you like to add anything else?
Sure. For me, possibly because of my background in folk and character dance, dance for me is very much history and it's very much storytelling. And it's how the two combine to create a new way of looking at the world. So for somebody who is not yet danced and is interested in how to begin, jump over that hurdle to begin dancing, I would just say it's ultimately about your history And it's ultimately about your story. And all dance does is unlock the door for you to tell your story. And everybody's story is worth hearing, and everybody's story is worth being heard, and everybody's story is worth being told. And dance just gives you a tool in order to do that. So tell your story.
I absolutely love that answer. I loved it. Thank you so much. And also, I always ask this as well. What would you tell to somebody who's listening right now that may be going through what you're going through? So they may have multiple sclerosis right now. It could be like a recent diagnosis. They could have had it for years. What would you tell them?
Sure. So for somebody maybe who is just recently diagnosed, the first thing I would say to you is welcome. And I would say, please know you're not alone. And please know that this is not a death sentence. You can have many, many, many years of beautiful life, unaffected life even, depending on where you are in your diagnosis and where you are with your doctors and different medications and different therapies to help you. You can have many years. It doesn't have to be a hugely scary thing, although I want every person who's just diagnosed to hear me. That fear, that anger, that confusion, that unknown thing that you are feeling and experiencing, please know that that's normal and you will get through it. But go through it. Please don't push it aside and think that it's just you being overly dramatic or you not handling it or you not doing X, Y, or Z. It's absolutely normal, and there is no way through. You can't go over it, you can't go under it, you just have to go through it, and then you'll come out the other side with tools in order to help you keep going. So that would be that's my best advice to somebody who's just diagnosed. For somebody who's had MS for many years and is in different parts of their journey with MS, I think then the important thing is, whether it's an MS community or a chronic illness community, your family loves you, your friends love you, your doctors love you, okay? But they don't always understand what it is to live with a chronic illness. And having a community of people around you, no matter what the chronic illness is, that can really talk the talk with you and can really walk the walk with you and just understand on an experiential level of what it is that you're going through, is important. So if you haven't already found that community, find your community, find your chronic illness or your MS warrior community. It's really important to have that.
Wow, absolutely love that answer as well. Thank you so much. So good. So this is the end of the podcast now. Is there anything else you would like to say?
Sure. I would just say thank you so much for having me, Sophia. I really love being here with you today, and I love your work. I'm so glad that I found you, and I think that the people understanding all the different aspects of how the brain and how dance work together is really it's a beautiful marriage. So I'm so excited. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm so glad I had you here in the podcast. I think yeah, I've invited you because you commented on one of my posts, and I was like, yeah, definitely I need to hear this story. Because I think it's so inspiring. And I have already interviewed the dancer, and she's my friend, and she has MS as well. And I think it's just so good to have that voice, that dancer voice who's gone through that, and how they cope. I think it can be really helpful, because I can only imagine having a diagnosis like that, and when you have it, and probably the first few months must be so terrifying. So it's good to have that, hear someone else who's like, okay, I'm in the other side and I can tell you all about it. Okay, so this is now the end of the podcast. To everyone listening, thank you so much for listening, for taking the time to hear this amazing story, and I'll see you again in the next podcast.